So I don't know how well this is known among the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. fandom or whatever, but Marvel's Most Wanted wasn't the only Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. spin-off that Marvel tried to get off the ground at one point. Back in May of 2019, Marvel announced their plans to make two new Marvel projects, or two new Marvel TV shows, and one was Marvel's Helstrom, which did get released and was barely watched by anyone, and it's the only Marvel TV show to not even feature the Marvel logo, almost like they were trying to hide the show and pretend it didn't exist. And it's also one of the only Marvel TV it's the only Marvel TV show of the Marvel television live action era outside of Legion and The Gifted, where all these shows, you got Cloak and Dagger, you got Runaways, you got all the Netflix stuff, you got Inhumans, Agent Carter, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., Helstrom, Ghost Rider. Helstrom was the only show from this era of those live action shows where all the shows are saying they're in the MCU or whatever. Helstrom never even tried to pretend about that. Helstrom's, the people who created the show and people who worked on the show were just like, yeah, we're not in the MCU. We never wanted to be. We're just doing our own thing. And because of that, the show doesn't have a Marvel logo on it. It doesn't have anything on it. It's a really, really weird thing. The show is fine. It's not even like it's terrible. It's just bland and generic. But it's so weird that they just didn't have any interest in advertising the fact that they were Marvel. They just were like, yeah, we're making a horror show that happens to be based on Marvel characters, and that's that. But we're not here to talk about Helstrom. Stop making me talk about Helstrom. I don't want to talk about Helstrom. Anyway, let's talk about Ghost Rider. Anyway, Helstrom was cancelled, but alongside the original announcement of Helstrom, we got Marvel's Ghost Rider. And these two proposed TV shows were going to be on Hulu and were being promoted as the first shows of Marvel's new Adventure into Fear banner, implying that they were setting up for a whole section of Marvel projects focused on their more scary characters or their more horror-focused characters. Now, Marvel's Ghost Rider matters for Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. fans because it was going to feature the return of Gabriel Luna as the Robbie Reyes incarnation of Ghost Rider, who was featured prominently throughout Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Season 4, which aired during 2016 and 2017. So there was almost 2 years between Ghost Rider's last appearance on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and the announcement of this project in May of 2019. And the show was planned to debut in 2020, and Marvel described it at the time as being a show about the quintessential anti-hero who lives on the Texas-Mexico border, consumed by hellfire and supernaturally bound to a demon. When he unleashes the Rider, Robbie brings vengeance for the innocents he encounters, but struggles controlling the power he wields. Marvel's Ghost Rider is executive produced by Ingrid Escudeta, who will serve as showrunner, Paul, and Marvel Television's Jeff Loeb. The showrunner was supposed to be Ingrid as well, and they said that I couldn't be more excited and honored to be handed the reins to a Marvel character as beloved as Ghost Rider, who is a very beloved character. I mean, I feel like Ghost Rider, before the MCU, was one of the most popular Marvel characters. He's a very well-known character. A lot of people know about him. Even just outside the Nicolas Cage films, I feel like people know who Ghost Rider is in a way that they might not with some other Marvel characters, to the point where I sort of wonder, there might be a lot of people out there who know of Ghost Rider but don't know that he's like a Marvel character or something like that. Because Ghost Rider to me always feels like Hellboy, where it's like a comic book character and it's a well-known comic book character, but Hellboy is not, in Marvel or DC or anything like that. I wonder if people feel the same about Ghost Rider, where they don't realize he's attached to Marvel sometimes. Anyway, Ingrid also said, this story hits every note for me. My love for grounded yet conflicted characters and my desire to scare the shit out of people. It's important to me to find a take that thrills existing fans as well as wider audiences, and I believe we've done just that. Now, less than 5 months later, in September of 2019, it was announced that the show would not be moving forward due to creative differences. But I feel like this whole thing is kind of insane, right? For a show to be announced and then cancelled within 4 to 5 months, that's insane a little bit. And I feel like those creative differences may have just been Marvel wanting to do their own thing with the MCU, not be bound to a Ghost Rider show, and I assume Feige has plans to do Ghost Rider stuff eventually. So at the time, he could have been like, I want to use Ghost Rider and do my own thing with him. I'd rather not have a TV show I have to battle with or whatever to see who's going to be the more iconic or the more liked version of the character. But also, this was during the time when Marvel went completely insane on the television lineup and just started cancelling absolutely everything that wasn't Disney Plus related. Now, Helstrom obviously got off the ground with a single season before being cancelled, but my personal opinion on that is that Helstrom was so far removed and solo from anything Marvel, including the Marvel logo not even being on it, that Feige and co. essentially had plausible deniability with Helstrom, where it's like, yeah, it's its own show, off doing its own thing. Sure, it may be based on Marvel characters, but it's got nothing to do with us. But Ghost Rider immediately has connections to Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. just due to the character and the actor. So the deniability there and the ability to be like, it's not related to anything we're doing, is a little less clear because Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. is still very much attached to the main MCU. So if you have a Ghost Rider show that's attached to Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., you can't really act like the Ghost Rider show is its own thing in the same vein you can with Helstrom. Some other little tidbits is that Hulu said it wasn't going to be a traditional Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. spin-off, which raises the question a little bit, would this have been a spin-off at all? Because I feel like saying something like that is corporate speak for it was going to be its own show in its own continuity. I feel like you would want people to think it's an Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. spin-off, considering Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. was a popular show. Hulu kind of dancing around that with being like, well, it's not a traditional spin-off, makes me feel like it might not have been at all. But in counter to this, Jeff Loeb, who headed Marvel Television at the time, did say the show would reference Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Season 4, so who knows. Now, in October of 2021, we got our only ever insight into what the show would have been, where comicbook.com did an interview with Gabriel Luna, where he talked about how the show was going to include all sorts of classic comic book Ghost Rider villains, such as Lilith, and how she would have been this villain of like a whole storyline where they wanted to have 4 separate shows team up Defender style to fight her. And Gabriel said this was an idea that he pitched and that it would have kept Robbie in LA. Now, this sounds really, really, really cool. But Gabriel saying this was an idea that he pitched makes me a little skeptical that this was actually going to be the direction of the show, because the synopsis we talked about a few minutes ago described the show as taking place on the Texas-Mexico border, and having a show set in LA sounds very different to that. So I have a funny feeling this was just what Gabriel wanted the show to be and not what it actually would have been. Now, the official Marvel.com website had something very interesting in their article when the show was first announced. Not one mention of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. in this article, or this being a spin-off at all. Outside of a mention of projects Gabriel has starred in, that's the only place they mention Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. They say Gabriel was in Terminator Dark Fate and he was in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. That's it. They don't mention the fact that Robbie Reyes was in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. They don't mention the fact that Gabriel Luna is reprising his role from Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. This is the Marvel.com website. I feel like that's pretty damning for how this would have actually tied into Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. I think you pair this with Hulu's cagey description of the show not being a traditional spin-off, makes me question what this show would have been in relation to Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Now, this next part is completely speculation, so, don't take this as gospel or fact, but hear me out here, and this is my read on what that would have meant. So, I don't know how many people watching this video are DC fans or know of DC TV very well, but I would compare this situation maybe to like the Arrowverse and to Superman and Lois. And for anybody who doesn't know, Superman and Lois stars Tyler Hoechlin and Elizabeth Tulloch, who play Superman and Lois Lane. And they are reprising their roles as the two characters from the Arrowverse, where they appeared in Supergirl and a couple of the Arrowverse crossovers as the exact same characters in the years before Superman and Lois came out. After they did really well in the crossover, I think it was after Elseworlds, they announced that they were making a Superman and Lois spin-off featuring the two characters, saying it was set in the Arrowverse. The show came out. The first season included references to the Arrowverse. The first season even included a character, John Diggle, from the Arrowverse. The first season is pretty undeniably in the Arrowverse, and it was still being advertised as such. In season 2, things got a little more weird, where the references conflicted with things we knew from the Arrowverse. The canon wasn't really lining up. The timeline wasn't really lining up. Started making people question, was this actually tied to the Arrowverse at all anymore? And then we got the reveal in the season 2 finale that Superman and Lois had removed themselves from the Arrowverse, that it was now a show that is set in its own continuity, on its own Earth, that just happens to feature people who look exactly like the Superman and Lois from the Arrowverse. Just multiverse shenanigans. Which, fair enough, the show wanted to do its own thing, stand on its own 2 feet, not be beholden to 6 seasons of Supergirl, where Supergirl would have used up so many Superman villains. I get it. I think how they went about removing the show could have been done more respectfully and more tactfully and worked better for the fans, but at the end of the day, I get why they did it. My read of this situation would have been a similar thing. I feel like in this scenario, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. is the Arrowverse. This Ghost Rider show would have been Superman and Lois. Not saying, that we could expect a huge jump in quality for Ghost Rider, the way Superman and Lois sometimes looked a lot better than the Arrowverse. But I'm just saying that I think this would have been a similar situation where, yes, it's Gabriel Luna playing Robbie Reyes, but it's not technically the same Robbie Reyes as we saw in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. They probably would have been very vague about references, not to decanonize anything or confirm anything, just to play in that little gray area of think what you want to think. But the writers are probably going at the angle of it's not related because we don't want to have to deal with the references, or we don't have to deal with where's Daisy Johnson sort of thing. And this would have been frustrating for fans, especially coming at a time where Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. was fighting every day to be canon to the MCU, to have a spin-off of the show come out and even that spin-off not talking about Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. would have been really, really, really weird. But I don't know. That's my read of the situation of what this would have been. Anyway, the Ghost Rider show, would you have liked to see it? Would you have liked to see it even knowing that it wouldn't have connected to Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. very well or at all? Would that have affected your enjoyment of this show? I would have really liked to see it. I think Marvel at this time, say what you will, but their shows were really different. Like every show they were putting out in this era was very, very, very different. Some of the shows didn't work for everybody, but I think at the end of the day, all of the ideas, they felt like you were looking at different corners of the Marvel universe kind of thing. It felt like everything felt removed from each other, but in a way that worked. And it felt like you could believe that these guys are in this part of America and these guys are in this part of America sort of thing. And I really did appreciate that. And I think Ghost Rider would have continued that, where it feels like you can see why it's removed from everything, but it still feels like it works in that wider universe. So yeah, let me know if you would like to see it. I did not make one of these videos for like a month. I remember I said I was gonna make an Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. explained video every 2 weeks or 1 week. I'm gonna try and get back into it because I do enjoy making these videos. It's just hard to come up with new ideas for them. But if you are not subscribed yet, make sure to do so. There'll be Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. videos. They'll happen. I don't know when they'll happen, but they'll happen. I am planning on doing a rewatch of the show. So when that rewatch starts, I'm sure I'll like keep spotting things in every other episode. I'll be like, oh, that would be a good video to make. And I'll pump up the numbers on that. If you are already subscribed, a like and a share is always a huge help. Thank you so much for watching, and have an amazing day.